Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, huge guest from the band Head Wound City, from the band Swing Kids, from the band Struggle, from the band Locust, from the band Def Club, from the band, we just go on and on naming all these bands, Satanic Planet, Dead Cross, All Leather, The Crimson Curse, Retox. Justin Pearson is on the show today. And he also has a brand new memoir, GG Allin and the Mystery Meat, which comes out next week. I'll talk about all this stuff and more in 1 second. I hope you're excited because this is one of the most requested guests we've ever had on Turn Out a Punk over the years. So it has finally happened. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, you can head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham. Thank you, Tristan, for all the hard work you do on this show. And he will get the message to me. You can find me occasionally on, very, very rarely on, I guess, the old ghost town known as Twitter these days. But I still have an Instagram that I post videos on and all sorts of things. You can find that at Leftford Damian for both of those. There are also a Turn Out a Punk Facebook page, as I mentioned before, I think, an Instagram page, a TikTok page, and a YouTube page. All those can be found at Turn Out a Punk on those platforms. And we post videos that I make from this show on all those things. A lot of those are run by my brother, so you can get in touch with us over there as well. I play in a band. We are called Fucked Up, and we have a brand new record just announced last week coming out on Sub Pop Records. A dream come true for me. It's like sort of this meta tribute to Poison Idea, and yeah, check it out. You can order it over there at subpop.com, or you can find out more information about this band and all the stuff that we're not doing too much these days, but over at fuckedup.cc for more information about Fucked Up. All right, on to today's show. Woo! As I said off the top, this is probably one of the most requested guests on this podcast over the years. Justin Pearson is here. From 31G Records, author of many memoirs, member of many, many legendary important bands. And yeah, someone I've never gotten to meet, never gotten to talk to. Of course, seen him play a number of times over the years in different projects, but this has been a long time coming for me. And oh my gosh, am I excited that you get to hear it now. We talk about tons of stuff. It goes all over the place. Justin is one of those people that has had a huge impact on this music and shifted the course of it in different projects. And yeah, like he is a very influential person, as I'm sure you are well aware. And so there's a lot of places we could have gone in this conversation. I don't tread on topics that he talks about all the time. So there's probably, you can go read the Wikipedia if you need a refresher on who this guy is prior to this stuff. But we go deep on the punk rock philosophy stuff. Oh my gosh, this is the type of guest that I love having on the show. Someone who's, wants to get in the weeds of this thing. Justin has been busy. As I said off the top, he has a brand new memoir. He's got a bunch of memoirs, but his latest memoir is coming out next week on January 31st on 31G, and it is called GG Allin and the Mystery Meat. And you can pick it up. You can order it now online. I'm sure you can order it through your local bookstore as well. It will probably have very good, proper distribution. This thing looks amazing, and he's an incredible writer. Also, Justin has been busy, as always, with music stuff. And over the last year has put out a bunch of different things with a bunch of different projects he's involved with. Of course, Def Club had a new record, Bad Songs Forever, which came out last year. Also, they did a split EP as well. There's also Retox had Beneath California, which came out on Epitaph, and it is a fantastic record. Epitaph and 31G. And you can find more information about that in the bio thing for this episode. Like the description for this episode, I should describe it as. There'll be links to this sort of stuff, and check out everything Justin does. The guy is truly like a visionary, a punk musician in all these different projects that he's been involved in. And yeah, like also he's a podcast himself. which we talk about a little bit on the show. I could just spend this whole, I could spend a whole other hour just running over this guy's CV, but that's not what you're here for. You're here for the episode. So I will sit back and let you sit back, relax, and enjoy Justin Pearson on Turned Out a Punk. Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor for sure.
Well, it's an honor to talk to you because as we were just kind of hashing over before we got on air, we go a ways back, more from me as a fan to you as a performer type thing. But we've been in this scene for a long time.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm surprised I made it. I'm surprised most people made it this far. So yeah.
Well, let's go back to how it all started. Justin, do you remember the first time you ever came across punk? Do you remember how you got into the genre?
I think it was like a gradual sort of like an ease into it, I guess. There's all these like adjacent kind of bands or things that got me into it. I always reference like Thrasher skate rock compilations. So I was really into skateboarding, and I just there was like this punk dude at a Vans skate shop, and he was like, you got to buy this Thrasher skate rock cassette, and I did, and I was like, fuck, this is wild. But I feel like I was already kind of on a similar trajectory through things like Ferris Bueller's Day Off had that band Sig Sig Sputnik in it, and I was completely obsessed with that. I'm pretty sure before I knew what punk was, and I got that record just and was totally blown away by the art and the obviously the music and stuff, but a lot of people wouldn't even really consider that punk necessarily. And then it was just like the whole floodgates open, like Sex Pistols and Suicidal Tendencies and everything else. So that was it. But yeah, I mean, I guess partially probably like Ferris Bueller's Day Off and then Thrasher skate rock comps were the ones that like got me going.
So were you familiar with like JFA? Because you're in Arizona at this point, right?
Yeah. So I would always see their skateboard before I knew they were a band. I would see their skateboard, and I was always like tripped out because it had two tails on it. It didn't have it was like not a normal skateboard, and I was just like, what the fuck is that? And the logo was weird, and I just eventually figured out that it was a band, and went to a local record store, Zia Records, and got one of their albums, and then eventually ended up seeing them play. So it took a minute, but that was they had an interesting marketing. The fact that they had a skateboard got me into their band, which I think might have been like reverse for most people. They're like into the band and then get the skateboard. But yeah, I just remember like kind of tripping out on how weird they were. And I liked the band, but it wasn't like the thing for me. I kind of was like wanting more jarring stuff. With all that whole like realm of skate rock stuff, it was Septic Death that really like hit the nail on the head for me. So
where would you have heard them other than just on those Thrasher comps? Because those records were pretty obscure. Now they're obviously very pricey, but even then.
Yeah, but so I mean, we're talking like 80, let's see, 85, I guess, maybe 84. Fuck, maybe I don't even, maybe earlier than that. Whenever they were coming out, I was just into skateboarding, which every kid should have been at that time. And so I would just go to these skate shops, not really like knowing what I was doing. I mean, I was a decent skater, but I was just kind of going there as a child. It was like I made this shift from like going and like looking at Star Wars toys to going and looking at skateboards, And so I would just see all the shit there and want the weird clothes, or like like I wanted like Vision streetwear shoes or whatever, or like looking at all the skateboards. And then there was the shelf with like, I remember it had like trucks and wheels in it, and then it also had the cassettes in it from the skate rock comp, and I was just like, okay, so this must be the music that is associated with these skateboards. And then that was kind of it. But then getting Thrasher Thrasher magazine was also like a thing, because you look through Thrasher magazine and there's like subscribe and get this free whatever record, and I'm just like, what? And so I would kind of, it was, and then the again, like going back to the Pusshead thing, the Septic Death thing, linking to Pusshead and having his art everywhere. I was really into Alva and the people that skated, like Bill Danforth was like my jam, and all these people using pus head art and stuff kind of tied a lot of things together. So as soon as I found out that the guy that was drawing all these rad skulls was the singer of Septic Death, it was just like fucking game on, and then also watching skate videos because I lived in Phoenix, so it was like, in the summer it was like 120, so there wasn't like a lot of competitions or outdoor skating and stuff, but I would watch some videos and I would see people. I remember seeing a video with Lance Mountain in it, and he had a helmet with a Sam Hain sticker in it, and just like seeing that Sam Hain skull, I was like, that's cool. What's that? And then just kind of started figuring it out. Yeah, I mean, pre-internet, I was like a sponge. I was just like, what's that? And then go figure all these things out. Luckily, the people at the van shop thought I was cool and wasn't too annoying as like a 10-year-old or whatever, and they're just like, get this and do that and do that. And it worked out. So
It's such a weird scene in Phoenix. Like I've got like a little subsection in my record collection for records from Phoenix because, the Placebo Records stuff and then Sun City Girls, like there's like, it's like real aggro punk, but at the same time, it's also like super, super arty.
yeah, which kind of seems a little bizarre, especially in retrospect for me, because like I moved out of there when I was 12, started playing music in San Diego, and then anytime I went back there, all the people that were going to our shows were just fucking dicks to us and dicks to me. I mean, I have like I can talk a lot of shit about people in Phoenix and they're fucking assholes, and I have every right to say that. I think, not to sound like jaded or bitter or uptight or bummed out, but like just some like dork band put like a little backwards thing that says like fuck the swing kids on it, and it's like, ooh, and then there's like some other loser that put out a fake Locust record, which was kind of a drag because I mean, I don't give a fuck if they put out a fake Locust record, but they're making kind of a lot of money off of it, and we were all broke, and I was like, that's a dick move right there, man. You want to, I mean, it's like one thing to like fuck with someone, but like also a thing to just like capitalize off of like a broke band. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna make a shitload of money selling those things on eBay. And it, wasn't even us. So like, yeah, fuck Arizona.
Who was the band that beefed with the Swing Kids?
I don't even remember what they're called.
I can't remember that either.
I don't even remember what they're called. Unra, maybe that was what they're
Oh,
called. I don't know.
really?
There was all these like, there's all these like second rate bands that were coming out of there. It's just like, I don't know, like whatever. Like I know, like for me, I wouldn't put out a record and say like fuck this other like mediocre band. So like for someone to be like, hey, fuck Swing Kids, it's like, dude, that you wasted. Like that was your message. Like you didn't say something righteous, like fuck the cops or something. Like you just went and said fuck Swing Kids, ooh, and like what, they sold like 40 copies and like no one gave a shit anyhow. So it's yeah, it's just kind of like whatever, stupid shit, I guess. Yeah.
It surprised me with Unruh too because I could see them being influenced by Struggle.
Maybe, I don't know. People were fucking dicks to Struggle too. It was kind of a bummer, and I was just even later on with the Locust, like we would play shows there and people would throw meat at us and shit. I'm like, this is dumb, dude. Like, I mean, I guess getting ham sandwiches thrown at you is better than like you're getting your tires slashed or beaten up, which also happened elsewhere. But I was just like, really, you guys gonna throw fucking ham croissants at us? Like that's kind of dumb.
This is jumping way, way ahead, but there was a lot of animosity towards the Locust. Like as much as, especially now, people look back on it like how important and influential the band was. There was like a real, and I say this as someone who did kind of have a visceral reaction to it, but because it was stylized and because it was a departure from quote unquote traditional hardcore, people got their backs up towards it. I didn't throw ham sandwiches at you, I promise.
No, I mean, if you did, it's fine. I mean, I'm all about like, hey, you fucking did this stupid thing to me. Like, let's talk about that. Like, I on Facebook, I messaged the guy that killed my dad, and I was like, yo, what's up, man? Like you killed my dad, and he didn't write back. So like, I'd be like, hey, you threw ham sandwiches at me. Like, what's up? Why were you like such a fucking butthole over something? I'm sorry, your band sucked. Whatever, and let's move on. But I don't know. Like the sort of animosity towards the Locust was weird because people were really into shitting on us for our street clothes and stuff, and I didn't think it was that weird. And I mean, you got to consider like I grew up listening to things like The Exploited and stuff. So like that look was cool and made sense. And then like, I also grew up listening to Chain of Strength, and I would look at them looking like kind of like jocks or whatever. So everyone had a vibe and a look, and people just shit all over any of us, like Swing Kids or the Locust or whatever. And I just thought it was kind of weird because it's just clothes, and like who cares really about the way we dress? And it wasn't like we were putting a lot of effort into it. It was just stuff we would get for free by stealing or stuff at thrift stores or whatever. And then that would be the focus, and then not on the music. Later on, there was a bit of shit talking because the Locust had synthesizers, but it was just like again, it's like, well, we were into like screamers and yeah, I don't know, whoever else, like, and also, I mean, whatever other bands use synthesize, Sigue Sigue Sputnik, it wasn't like wrong or bad. It was just what we wanted to do.
Well, I think like, and I've definitely felt this from doing the podcast, you realize how much of punk is shaped by people's insecurities, and especially people projecting their insecurities on bands in a lot of cases, and how that in some cases motivates great art. Like I think, as much as that Unruh thing probably bummed you out, it motivated them to make something. Like I always bring this up. There's a interview with Jamie Josta where he talks about how Hatebreed was inspired because he hated someone telling him that Quicksand was a hardcore band so much that he wanted to make a reaction to Quicksand being called a hardcore band. And that created Hatebreed. And I tell this to Walter, and Walter, I think, is bummed out on some level, but I'm like, how amazing is it? Because not everyone's going to like your music, but if you inspire someone enough with their hatred of your music that they're going to go out and create their own music, like you're still winning.
It's pretty good. We'd be on tour, and Gabe Serbian would play like some of the worst shit, and it would drive me crazy on tour in the van. I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, I gotta listen to this. It's fucking pissing me off. I'm gonna make them, like I'm gonna do the thing, like exactly, I guess what the dude from Hatebreed was doing, But I was like, it was probably like Hatebreed, that was playing. It was just shitty, like hardcore. I was just like, no, dude. Don't. But for me, I guess, and not that I want to be like woo woo or positive or something, but I was always like, let's listen to like Gary Newman or whatever, like fucking Tom Waits or whatever. Let's listen to some weird shit and then like bring that into hardcore. And again, like not to like throw Gabe under the bus, but he always had like the genius quotes where he would say, people would ask him like what hardcore bands he listened to, and he said, I don't listen to hardcore, I just play it. And I thought that was fucking genius. Because like I get like listening to something that's going to piss you off and push you to do something, but also like I'd rather listen to something that's like inspiring me to do something. And I think at the time that's where we were all kind of heading from. Like we were, like I grew up with, like in the ebullition scene, I guess, and I really respect Kent McClard, and a lot of those bands were some of my favorite bands, and I was able to put out records on ebullition, but that whole scene was it's kind of like the Karens of the left right now, like these people that are overtly politically righteous, and they're just like kind of a dick to you if you're like a little bit outside of the lane or whatever. And I think that like, a lot of those people from that scene, maybe Unruh is from it or whoever is from it, but like would just like shit on you if you did something weird. And for me at the time, it was like, all of a sudden there was like Nation Ulysses. I'm like, that's fucking weird and cool. Or like Crash Worship, that's fucking weird and cool. And neither band is like technically hardcore. Maybe, definitely punk ethically, but not punk musically. So I think it's just good to like find where you can draw your inspiration from and take it and create something that's not a replica, but that creates something, I don't know, influence whatever else, but then there's like, I guess it's like you're screwing with the purity of it, you're kind of like, it's like the race mixing of music or something, where you're like watering down the fucking bullshit, the whiteness or something. I don't know. So yeah, I guess maybe I'm going off on a tangent, but I think hardcore and punk kind of suck, and I feel like you kind of got to find like the cool shit in the world, at least in my opinion.
I think that the best thing about punk and hardcore is, like you said, what is it? At one point it's Exploited, at one point it's the Locust, at one point it's the Screamers, at one point it's Hatebreed. And I think part of the fun is drawing your little box and being like, well, this is it. and anything that's not in this box is not it, and then defending that. And I think part of growing up, especially if you try and maintain being involved in this music, is realizing how ridiculous you were, thinking that you could define this thing that is far bigger than any of us. And
Yeah.
as soon as you think you have it figured out, someone's calling you a poser.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that,
Well, I guess the oh, fuck. The drawing your box thing is interesting because maybe because in San Diego there was never we never really drew a box. We would kind of maybe draw a blob and like kind of fit whatever we could in there. Because I think in San Diego, since we're a little bit outside of the like average, Los Angeles trek for touring bands and stuff, we kind of had to make do with like strange stuff and like incorporate any of our friends or like-minded people into a quote unquote scene. So like, we'd go put on shows and it's like I remember struggle playing with like reggae bands and shit or playing with Rock from the Crypt or 3 Mile Pilot or something. And like it was always kind of just these are our friends and maybe they're not exactly like us, but we have a lot of common ground and let's just share that and make something cool, maybe for a bigger picture of like a community or something, and not be an elitist dick about something that's kind of like irrelevant. I mean, if you think about it, people's gripes and like the shit that I guess, maybe the Locust had to deal with is seemingly irrelevant. And, it is what it is, but I think maybe that might be where we were coming from. So we never really had a box to draw. We were kind of just like, hey, you're cool and you're weird. And I think what you're doing is cool. It might not be my jam, or we don't sound the same or look the same or act the same, but we are doing something and let's connect on that. And I guess I wish that happened more. But I'm also grateful that, people were dicks to us because it might have not made us aware of that aspect, whatever. It's like the life struggle stuff. You're like, oh, I struggled in life because of this, and now I'm a little bit more empathetic. Where like you look at people who lack empathy, maybe they've just been like a rich asshole their whole life, and they weren't capable of like finding any kind of love or kindness. So yeah, it is what it is.
and not necessarily that you're drawing these boxes, but these boxes kind of get drawn by us in a way. Like was Grilled Cheese Records and those kind of bands a part of the thing in San Diego? Because
I've never heard of Grilled Cheese Records, but that
that's
sounds great.
that's Blink 182,
Oh,
Swindle. I guess Unwritten Law would be lumped into that
okay.
too.
We
Um,
knew all the Swindle people, but I mean, I think like at the time when Blink was happening, we were kind of just on this weirdo trajectory, and Blink was just too normal for us. The Swindle people we all knew because we had, or me at least, had beef with them at the time, and I love them so much now. But it was at the time we had like a little bit of beef. They actually put out a Swindle cassette that said like "fuck the swing kids." I don't know. We were doing something right or wrong. I don't know,
I love
but.
your diversity of beefs where you've got Unrun and Swindle.
Sure, let's just fucking burn down the whole lot. But I mean, Swindle ended up becoming like really good friends of ours, and I mean, the Locust played shows with them and stuff, and like I really like those guys. So there's that. Unra, I mean, I don't really know exactly who the band is, or I don't even remember like much about it. And I don't really care, but I don't really have beef with any of it. I just think like, joke's on you because you wasted your time talking shit, and it didn't really get anywhere. Like we all just kept going, I mean, the band like Swing Kids broke up, but not because of because of that petty shit.
Yeah, and Toronto through your influence on Chris Callahan, I think the Swing Kids are like one of the most influential hardcore bands to me of
Hmm.
the 90s. Like that band for like your output too, it's amazing the impact that it had. Going back and
Which is
listening to it
I
now, it's
appreciate that, but it's weird. It was like 11 songs, and like barely a band for 2 years.
yeah, but it's funny the impact of some of this stuff, and I think that's the great thing about punk and hardcore is because people make these records and or these little projects, and then the ripples effects of these things are massive years later. And Swing Kids, like looking at it now, it almost seems like a synthesis of like the kind of Gravity Records, San Diego, with like that drive like Jehu, San Diego kind of coming together.
100%. I mean, Eric Allen wanted to play exactly like John Reis. And we all loved to drive like Jehu, and obviously grew up with Gravity Records. I mean, that was kind of the coolest thing happening in San Diego. And, you know, I mean, in our opinion, I mean, there was the Blink-182 grilled cheese stuff that you mentioned, which obviously was huge. But for us, we were just like, wow, Gravity Records, that is like the coolest shit. And, you know, we were kind of adjacent to a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I think like the ripple effect is interesting. I mean, we didn't know what the fuck we're doing. I was the weak link in Swing Kids for sure. Those all the other three were like really good at playing their instruments. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no business being a singer and or lyricist. And I'm grateful that I got to go along for the ride. And you know, I mean, those are some of my best friends, and I was bound to be part of it regardless. And I think at the time too, maybe there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on musicianship. That and I think that's kind of cool in itself. I just wish I just wish I was like better at what I did back then. But it is what it is. But you know, there's a lot of times you'll look at a singer and you'll be like, who the fuck picked that person? You know, and I feel that way about myself. I was like, why did they let me do that? I should have stayed on the bass or whatever, you know, I was playing bass and struggle. So but it is what it is. But it wasn't it at the time. It really didn't. It wasn't. There wasn't a future. There wasn't a longevity. We were kind of just like, let's do this right now. And it was really kind of more for the sake of, I don't know, like, well, art obviously, but also I think this sort of strange survival tool, maybe, you know, as a young person in America at that time. It was just like, how do we survive? And sounds kind of silly or naive, but like that was a way to kind of feel inspired and want to stay alive, I suppose.
Yeah, it's amazing how how it was done just to do the thing. Like the only thing
Yeah, of
that's comparable
course.
to is religion, right? Like, because there's no commercial goal in sight at this point. Like now, I think every time someone makes music, there's that outside chance in hell that they're like gonna make it. But back then, yeah, I love Struggle, Tradition, one of my favorite songs of all time.
Um,
But there's no upward trajectory, I think, on MTV for Struggle at that era.
no, not at all. And I mean, even like the my entire life is like, you know, I'd have my family being like, what are you doing? You're not on MTV, you're not making money, you're not, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Just fuck off and like, you know, let me do it. Yeah. It's funny because sometimes like some of my friends or ex-bandmates or something will like start their new projects and their goal is to be popular and make money. And I'm like, oh, you're fucking up right now. And it's hard. It's very, very hard to know that they're doing that and like to like accept it and give it the appreciation that I would normally give my friends' bands. You know, I'm like, ugh, you're doing it for you think you're gonna be popular and make money, like you're gonna fuck up and like it just sounds stupid.
Hmm.
I'm not
And
going to
it's
say those bands, but yeah,
but it's funny when you look on it now and you're like looking back on it on some sort of like careerist, like with a careerist perspective, I should say,
hmm.
how much of this thing holds us back from making quote unquote good decisions for our financial future or maybe even our artistic future on some level, if like getting your work seen by as many people as possible is the goal. Like, because there have been people from our scene that have made it. You know,
Yeah.
for all the failures there have been some success stories, and it's like, did I let that Ian Mackay on my shoulder or that ebullition scene under my pillow hold me back from making it on MTV?
That's a good point. I think there's like, oh man, because I feel the I feel like if it's like a lottery, really, you know, like, oh, you won the lottery, good for you, you know, and because I do trip out on, oh, I don't want to list certain bands, but like there's some bands that are kind of like doing their reunion comeback thing. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Captain. There's like these bands doing this like reunion comeback thing, and like I'm like, wow, you're just like super successful now. That's kind of bizarre, but and it's not. I don't. It's not me like being like jealous. Like, why the fuck didn't it happen to me? But I just think like maybe my dog's so mad at someone outside. Hey, buddy, chill. Anyhow, I don't understand why it worked for them. I'm glad it did because I think like all of the bullshit that we all did in our teens and 20s that had like zero financial benefit. I feel like if you can be paid back for all that work and effort, then like that's cool. Because let's face it, like everyone now is capitalizing off of this thing that a lot of us put effort into. You know, like the music trajectory, like honed in on like all the cool, weird underground stuff. So like, you know, but again, like we were doing the same thing. It's like I don't know, like was Six Sputnik making a lot of money? Maybe because they were in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but like I doubt they were making a shitload of money in general. But also like there was some weird quote from Ian MacKaye. I wish I knew how to like paraphrase better, but like he kind of said like at some point he was like, "Oh, it's weird that this artistic musical output it became a like a sort of capitalistic commodity," and it is true because I think I don't know, like I don't know if any of us, at least in most of the bands that I've been in, like I don't think we did it to kind of make money or anything. We kind of did it to communicate with people and not even communicate on a massive level, but just amongst a smaller community. And like not to keep going off on these like weird tangents, but a friend of mine, Martin Atkins, who was in like PIL and Ministry and all the good bands, he always like referenced this thing where like if you go play a show and you make 2 new fans, you're successful. And it just hit me like just it was such a um it was such a relevant punctual thing for me to hear from someone like that who I grew up obsessing over all of his work, and to say 2 people, and I'm like, why 2? And he's like, well, you know, because those 2 people might be all that really matters, because they'll go on to do something else or whatever it is. And it really was an important learning tool for me, because you know you think about like him and him in general, like writing PIL's Flowers of Romance, like that was like the weirdest anomaly because it shouldn't have been popular, it shouldn't have been on a major label, it shouldn't have been anything. It was like a weird hodgepodge of shit that now is one of like the most influential records to post-punk or whatever you want to call it. And I think that they were just like fucking around and using like their limited resources to create a piece of art. And I think that might be where like most of us come from. So when you are like fucking around creating some kind of piece of art with limited resources and you stumble upon something that resonates, that's great. But when you do have more resources and you're like, we're gonna redo this thing and make a bunch of money, then you're kind of like fucking up. I don't know. When you die, you can't bring all that money with you anyhow. So it's like I'd rather make something like rad and kind of live poor than like make something mediocre and capitalize off of it.
Yeah, definitely. Then then there's this thing where I did a podcast with Pinhead Gunpowder, and
Ah,
seeing those guys, and it was like within the context of Green Day being in Toronto, and seeing Green Day, like here's this band, and say whatever you will about them as like this punk band and what they've done, but they've been able to kind of give all their friends jobs, like good jobs, for years, and kind of just live in their own little universe. And there's that fantasy, like there's that thing that like you'll never be more pure than the Screamers, who didn't even put out that fucking record, and that's how perfect they are, right? You'll
yeah,
never be more Chase than they are.
yeah, yeah.
But then there's the other side of it where it's like, yeah, but you could be Green Day, and all your friends could have jobs for years, and it's like I can see the temptation. Like obviously, I had limitations being fat, bald, and in a band called Fucked Up. So I really like you have a lot more commercial upside. You still have all your hair.
Yeah, but then there are the I don't know if the hair really is. The hair doesn't make you make better music. I'll just go ahead and throw that out there right now.
No, Midnight Oil, greatest band of all time, right there. We proved it.
It's true. It's very true. But I mean, Pinhead Gunpowder is an interesting thing too. Like I remember seeing them play, and I mean, I saw Green Day play at the Che Cafe to nobody, and I mean, good for them. I'll just say that, good for them. I remember playing a show with Swing Kids at Punks with Presses, this place in Oakland, and Lars Fredrickson from Rancid was there, and he was right like right when they got big, and I had already kind of known him from this playing around or whatever, and he was like he was like, yeah, a lot of people are talking shit. He's like, I just want to buy my mom a house, and I was like, fuck, that's so rad. And as much as I hate Rancid musically, and maybe like some of their aesthetics and stuff, I kind of refrained from talking shit because I was like, that's kind of like a real admirable thing. Like that was his goal, just to like hook his mom up, which is the person that birthed him. And I feel like maybe that would be like really, I want to do that to my mom. And my mom's always like, when are you gonna buy me a house? And I'm like, fuck, I'm sorry. Do you see the shit I'm doing? It's probably not gonna happen. So
She's like,
um
do a Rancid cover for Christ's sake, then.
yeah. But like, even if I tried to do that, it's like, I mean, I think maybe Rancid was on their own trajectory where they like won that lottery. They did it. I don't know if Rancid did it to like cash in, or if they just did it and got like, they pulled the lever and it all lined up with the three cherries or the sevens or whatever. I'm not sure if that's how it worked for them. But now there's a gazillion Rancid like bands that are just like, and so I'm not going to do that. I don't know what to do. It's like, yeah, I don't know what to do.
And but like, and I say this as someone, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think I would have gotten into struggle without Rancid. Like, you need those bands to do that kind of stuff to repopulate the scene. Like, you need the Suicidal Tendencies playing on MTV. You need the Nirvanas. You need these bands. You need the Turnstiles, because you need those bands that quote unquote sell out, do whatever, go supernova, because they're going to bring in a whole crop of new kids, and not all of them are going to stay, but there will be some that stick around and start bands and book shows and become, that next wave.
Yeah, I guess maybe the like underlying topic here would be why, well, maybe two things: why we all do it, but also like what the actual benefit of it is, or what your payment is for for all your hard effort. Is it a financial thing, or is it more of like a moral, ethical thing? Because again, like you had referenced the Mackay and stuff, like that's like, or maybe I referenced them, but that's a good like sort of launching point, looking at how Fugazi ran themselves as a business, and that was a huge influence on me, and I think the Locust a lot. When we would go on tour and we'd like kind of fuck ourselves financially by not playing certain types of venues, and kind of even like passing on really big successful tours because we didn't want to associate or align ourselves with other bands or corporate entities that were part of the musical industry, I suppose. So like, and then at the end of the day, it's like, well, the Locust won't play again and it won't be a band again, but I can kind of be like, you know what, it is. And I don't want to sound like an asshole and be like, it's a flawless band. Like everything's fucking flawless or full of flaws. But I can look back and be like, you know what? We didn't fuck up and like put out that record that sounded like Taylor Swift. Like we kind of just kept going in the weird vibe and we did our thing and we were honest the whole time. And we did our best, I think. And I think that might be part of it. You can fuck up, but just do your best and don't fuck up for like the wrong reasons. Like, don't do it for like a stupid, like, I want to be fucking popular and I want to have like a gazillion Instagram followers and make a bunch of money. Like and then you fail or whatever. Like that, I don't know. Whatever. This is like asking what the meaning of life is. It's, it's like, I'm just glad I haven't like done anything really stupid yet. And it's fine.
Well, because with Ian Mackay, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, because I buy all these things, but he set up an industry to promote the legacy. Like, Discord is there to promote his art, and it's part of the canon. And those records never went out of print. So it was always there, kind of as their own kind of PR company for themselves in a way, like being like, here we are. Then you have someone like who I think had the same dedication and service to this music, but there was no branding that kind of gives him that credit. I'm not saying it's better or worse than what Ian's done, but I just think there is like a reward for promoting yourself that there isn't necessarily in just being the guy who's like Sure, I'll record your band. Sure, I'll help you lug this gear in. Sure,
Yeah.
I'll play in a bunch of cool bands, but we'll just do a couple 7 inches, and they won't really have the I don't know, I guess the cultural cachet.
Hmm. That's fucking crazy that you just threw O into the mix up against Ian. I'm like, because I miss O so dearly, but like when he was around, I would always say like, why don't you do this massive art show or like archival thing? And he was just like, ah, whatever. And I think he was always like maybe kind of just in the moment where maybe Ian is like looking to, like you said, like to make this sort of existing thing for some kind of longevity, a documentation of a thing where like Ian or where like, oh, I think was just like, I'm just here to have fun like tonight at the show and I'm gonna cut out and go surfing or skating tomorrow or whatever the fuck he was doing, like that's kind of cool. So yeah, that's goddamn, that's a good one.
And like I think like obviously the legacy of Ian MacKaye, like Fugazi, Embrace, Discord, like Minor Threat, everything he's done, but O's the guy that I can connect 16 to Fluff, to Decry, to Rock from the Crypt, to Blink
mhm,
182, to Dinosaur Jr., to the Melvin. Like you can just go on and on with O. He
yeah.
was someone who touched so many different worlds. And maybe that's why his legacy is going to be a lot harder to define because, like, how do you define someone that was so impactful in skateboarding, so impactful in all these subsects of punk rock, and still just like the most low ego, no ego, chill person on earth?
Well, maybe because he was able to integrate himself with everybody. And I think that might be a San Diego thing too. You know how I was kind of saying like, oh, struggle would have to play with Three Mile Pilot or not have to, but we would because I don't mean it in a bad way. I love Three Mile Pilot, but like it's insane that Paul Jenkins was like, hey, we should go on tour together. I'm like, we absolutely should, but this seems like a bad idea for one of us. But like O is able to kind of just go and do like the fact that he loved everything equally was really cool, and the fact that he could just appreciate pieces and bits of everything on the planet was like an impressive thing. Where again, going back to like the I only do this, I only play hardcore, I only like hardcore, I only listen to hardcore. It's like you're gonna just screw yourself up, you fuck yourself over by not being into these other things that might be equally as valuable in this world or to yourself or whatever. So there's that. Yeah, I don't know. But another thing, I do have a gripe about Ian, and I think he is kind of like the sort of like Pope of hardcore or something. But I really struggled a lot of times because they would stick to this like no merch thing and like $5 shows thing, and like they were already kind of financially stable, so they could have these like really rigid moral like guidelines or whatever. And I'm like, I can't afford that. Like, I can't afford to fuck around. I have to sell a bunch of stupid merch because our van isn't going to get from this city to the next without selling that crap. And we also aren't even getting paid. So, so it was. I mean, I appreciate what it was. It was for Fugazi. It wasn't for the Locust or anything I've ever done. But would I want to have that be like the sort of band template for me? Fuck yeah. I don't want to sell merch. It's this bullshit commodity. T-shirts suck. Fucking all that crap sucks. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Do I want to charge less money so everyone can go to the show for $5? Absolutely. I mean, fucking Blood Brothers were playing a show, last month, and it was $70 a ticket. I get it. The economy's changed quite a lot, but I just feel like I don't know. I'd rather just be like, maybe that's me being like maybe that's my like I'm being too political or something, like a socialist or something.
No, because I
um,
think the thing is, yeah, like it's the Fugazi model is like a perfect model, but like you're saying, it does require a certain amount of like financial stability to be able to afford to do that as a band, and also the ability to sell through 20,000 copies of a record on the road.
yeah.
And you saw it with Tragedy, I guess, was like sort of the last band in punk and hardcore when at a certain point they could put out a record sell it themselves, sell through like what 10,000, 8,000 copies just touring around, just selling it off their merch table. And Ebullition was doing their distro on the back end too. So it was there for a moment, this sort of like kind of like, perfect chase sustainable model, but like the idea of like that existing, especially today, is very, I think, silly.
I like days it's silly. I mean, it's very impractical. It's just there's no possible way. And maybe that I mean it probably has to do with it all has to do with capitalism really because we maybe we can function. I don't know, like Retox did a tour with the Off, and I thought Off was a really great band, and I really appreciated them. I had I felt for Keith at times where they would play shows and people wanted Black Flag or Circle Jerks and they were getting this other thing. And I'm like, yo, you got, Mario Rubalcaba on drums. It's better than all those bands. But they were able to tour in a van that was equipped to run on vegetable oil. And they got like whatever that fucking company is, RVCA, to give them blank shirts. So they like had all this like free shit. Like, they were not spending money on gas. They had free t-shirts that just had the brand's tag or whatever. And they were making like a lot of money and like, which they should. Like Keith should make a lot of money. He's a fucking veteran of this stuff. Like I feel like he probably has no normal retirement and that's why he's still doing this stuff. But when Retox was on tour with them, it was like, oh, we're fucked. We're getting paid $200 and we can't sell shit because people wanted punk rock and we were too abrasive. And it was just like a wash. But but for me, what I took from it was like, oh, I learned this thing. Like I watched Off go on tour as like a relevant new version of the things of Keith's legacy, I suppose, not to diminish the rest of the players, but it became this like, I mean, everyone looked at Off as like the new, even with the art and stuff, it was like the black, like the new cool, and it was fucking better and cooler. But they also found a way to do it like for really, like a really reasonably priced way for them. Not really reasonably priced, but they were making more money doing it. And I think that was a cool thing to pay attention to for me.
Well, because you guys also have 90s baggage. And I think the punk rock baggage and like the ethics of punk rock didn't really get solidified till like the late 80s and really get ingrained until the 90s. Like the idea of like DIY, silk screening, manila envelopes for record sleeves. Like, Mario's from that, obviously, and has that kind of background in that world, but Stephen McDonald was not really a part of it. Keith wasn't really part of it. And Dimitri's not really from that world either. So they don't think they would have the same sort of qualms about having another company's tag on the back of your shirt in the way that I think people that came through the 90s punk and hardcore kind of do. Like that, like,
yeah. Could you imagine
Fugazi?
Sure, there's no way Fugazi would do it. I mean, but Fugazi was even better because it's like, I mean, you're playing music. Who needs a fucking shirt? Like, you don't really need a shirt. I hate band shirts. I mean, that's why the Locust always just like throw the logo on there and don't fucking put any words on it. And like, at least it looks like a cool piece of art, I mean, the logo thing is like another lottery. It's like, how do you get the Black Flag logo, or the Crass logo? Like something just looks cool where you don't have to put like words on it. Words are bad. Like I don't want to say like the thing.
Yeah, you guys have a cool logo.
The Locust, yeah, we knocked that out somehow.
Yeah.
It was a total fluke though, and it's like, but I mean, not every band gets that, and also at the same time, it's like we were still selling the shit out of those shirts to try to make ends meet. And like, I'd rather just not do that at all. I'd rather just play music. Records are cool. It's like an experience, but like putting on a t-shirt, it doesn't matter to me.
And that's more what it is now. Like you're going to sell more shirts than records probably now.
Totally, because people just stream your record and then show your support, show that they have like an in or that they're cool and they're not into dumbass stuff. They're like, oh, I got the whatever band shirt,
I wonder with Fugazi, like obviously they're not doing it for a variety of reasons, but coming through now, where I guess it's like the North American labor force, you've just eroded your manufacturing base for this economy. Like we don't really have a physical product anymore that we're peddling. Now we're just peddling information. And I think like you talk to bands in the '90s and like they're selling 20,000 CDs, 10,000 CDs at some point, and that just doesn't happen anymore. Certainly not not at this level.
Yeah, which is pretty wild. I mean, this is a crazy topic to even discuss because I'm running a record label and I'm putting out vinyl like as much as I can. I enjoy vinyl, but it's like, would I opt to just not have the thing? Yeah, but I don't think there's a way to just get there's no way to get financial reimbursement from for all of the stuff that goes into making a song or an album unless you sell a actual physical thing because let's face it, all the streaming services don't give a fuck about the artists at all, and that's not fine, but it's fine because like what am I can't do anything about it. I can't go up against Spotify. Like it is what it is. I appreciate the fact that people listen to it and like it, but like at the end of the day, it still keeps us all broke. While like the owner of Spotify is like a billionaire or whatever the fuck I don't know what their value is. It's a lot more than mine. So like yeah, it's kind of wild. I don't know what the best outcome is. But again, like I never got into this to be like, hey, I'm gonna make some money or this is gonna be a career. I've always had jobs and I still probably will always have a fucking job. And so I'll just do this on in conjunction with it and as best as I can. If I was rich and I had like like expenses were like covered by regular whatever, I could probably have a more insane output and maybe a more precise. But here I'm like, I don't know, that recording's fine. Just put it out. We can't afford to fix it, and that's how it's always been. And for whatever reason, now people like that shit, Uh,
Because it's real, right? Like it makes in an era of perfection, like the imperfection becomes so much more important because that's what demonstrates that it's not AI on Spotify.
I just heard this really wild thing on NPR last night, actually, when I was stuck in traffic, and they were talking about this Italian singers like in her 80s, and they were saying how they were like they were trying to figure out if like it was really her singing the album. I wish I knew her name. I don't remember who it was, and I don't even care who her name was. It was just an interesting piece. But they were saying like how people were like, oh, it's definitely her, and she didn't use AI because her voice, she's 80 now, and her voice is like kind of fucked up, and she's still trying to do this thing, and people love it. People love the flaws in it. And I'm like, oh, because if it was flawless, it wouldn't have the like human stamp on it. Like, oh yeah, that's just like a thing that's got like there's no like little nuances of like whatever incorrectness. So like I'm like, fuck, well, I'm good then because everything of mine's just got fucking flaws throughout it.
Finally, imperfection pays off.
Yeah. But it is true. Like, who wants a flawless thing? I mean, you want to create a flawless thing and you want to create it yourself, or do you want to, plug in some AI program and have it done for you? I mean, I'd rather try to do it myself. I always like look back at like the Locust Plague Soundscapes, where I think that record is, and I don't want to say flawless, like an egotistical asshole. Like it's a flawless record. It's perfect. It's great. Like that's just art. And you can say it's garbage or it's good. You can do whatever you want. But as far as the musicianship and the recording process and the things that we did and we put into it, I feel like there's no things where I'd be like, hey, I fucked up that part, or this thing was recorded wrong, or we could have done this better or differently. Like it is what it is. And I think it was executed with 100% correct correctness from what we were like trying to achieve. And I like that. I like that I was able to reach that and go like, oh, that's what I want to achieve from here on out, because before it was like that Swing Kid shit. I'm like, dude, it was a fucking mess. And if, we had a few hours to record the whole EP, and what I would have loved to have been on time, like musically. Like I wish I was like better, but like we were just, for me, like that's a good example. Like we had like gone through getting all the fucking drum parts right, or like doing all the guitar overdubs, and it's like we have fucking 40 minutes left, time for the vocals, and I'm like, ugh, and I just like shit the bed, and like we ran out of time, and that was it. And so it goes into history, and that's the record.
I think like there's like this sort of idea of like what separates punk and hardcore, and I think punk allows for the imperfection more than hardcore does, especially now, where it's
Totally.
polished, but I think like Crime, Hotwire My Heart, they leave that fuck up on the record, and it's there forever because they're like, no, it's perfect, it's fine.
Or they were just like, we don't have any more time to record.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's there and it's perfect and it's fine
Yeah.
forever. And Sonic Youth covered it and did the fuck up on their cover of it because it's so part of the, I guess, the classic part of the feel of the song.
It does say a lot. And even like how now you see marketing techniques trying to look like a zine. You're like, oh yeah, the reason why zines look like zines is because we were all fucking broke and we had to go to Kinko's and steal the shit, and like now it's like an aesthetic that people want to capitalize on, which is fine. But same with punk. Punk was created from garbage and now it's like in museums.
But even then, it was kind of like it always had that pretension about it. Like I think it had the contradiction built into it back then, right? Like Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood and Warhol, and sort of like this sort of like art pretension to it. A bunch of poetry kids from New York. Yeah, like it had that kind of aspiration of being in the museum and being in the gallery, or like at least I think an awareness on some level that this was the end result. Like when the Clash are singing "No Elvis, no Beatles" and the Rolling Stones, there's almost like this sense of irony that they will one day become Elvis, Beatle, and the Rolling Stones.
Hmm. Well, yeah, fuck. Maybe you definitely touched upon something because I feel like who's to say what's good and bad and what should be in a museum or what's trash. But at the same time, I think like people like Andy Warhol or Malcolm McLaren, maybe not Malcolm McLaren as much, but Andy Warhol and probably the Sex Pistols and a lot of those bands, the Clash, whatever, they were inclusive of everyone, which was cool. And maybe in some way they were kind of like the bourgeois capitalizing off of the weirdo artist in the ghetto and then capitalizing on it. That might be the outcome, but I don't think that was their intention. I think they were just kind of like, you're cool and you're doing right shit. Let's be part of a thing. And like everyone kind of just did it. Because I do trip out on like Basquiat and Warhol's relationship. It was very interesting juxtaposed to there's a lot there. Class, but also race. So all those things play a huge part in everything. Obviously, art, but punk and stuff too. So I think that like that might be kind of like the sort of overarching point is like, are we being inclusive or exclusive? And I think that might be where a lot of like the sort of hardcore, maybe like the ebullition kind of pushback where they were like, you're not punk or you're not hardcore. It's like, well, who the fuck are you to say we are or are not? And that might be the part where it became like where the demise of it started. I mean, I don't want to say demise because it still exists. But like, I don't know, for me growing up, it's like I would see the Cramps play a mental hospital and be like, yo, they played to a bunch of fucking people at a mental hospital. You can obviously include anyone that you want in your thing and have it be cool. That's great. But I'd go play shows and have Kent McLeod and his friends fucking making jokes and talking shit and trying to sabotage Swing Kid's set because we weren't wearing baggy camo shorts and we were wearing tight pants. And it's like, well, fuck you, man. Like, we're still punks. We're still playing like a fucking Food Not Bombs benefit or whatever it is. So like, yeah, fuck you. I don't know.
Have you ever heard Ben Gibbard's cover of Minor Threat's Filler?
No.
It's incredible. It's just him on a piano.
Oof.
And it really opened up that song to me. And so I could finally hear like, oh, Ian's not mad. He's scared. And he's really insecure that he's going to lose this friend to, a girlfriend, to drugs, to society. And there's sort of this like real sense of desperation and loneliness to the lyrics that I never picked up on at the trillions of times I had listened to the Minor Threat version.
Yeah.
And, I don't know Kent that well at all, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm in his head or anything, but I think there was certainly an insecurity about the people around you, quote unquote, moving on or getting mature.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't have to be a psychologist to read the Some Ideas Are Poisonous comp insert and know that he had grappled with insecurity around being punk and how to stay punk and hardcore. So yeah, I imagine swing kids on a certain level post struggle would have been kind of threatening. Like, why are these kids moving on? Why we have this thing that's perfect? They don't need to leave.
Yeah, but there's evolution. I don't know if it's perfect. For you to
Oh, I
say
don't think it's
something,
perfect either.
no, not you, but like for anyone to say something's perfect is like, well, that might be because I feel like we should evolve. Like, who wants to, like, I don't want to play in a band like Swing Kids again. Like, I want to play in a band that's new or, modern. Like, the world's changing and it doesn't seem as relevant, that thing. There's a new thing that could be more relevant or more punctual now. So, like, yeah, I see what you're saying. But then you end up like becoming a dick and becoming like this weird like elitist person. I don't know, whatever. Like it's kind of like why did Unruh feel the need to talk shit about swing kids? They should have been like, yo, let's play shows together and like let's fucking do something righteous for like the bigger picture. Let's hate the same things together instead of like we're just gonna divide each other. That's like why I went back to my gripe about the left. We're just gonna fuck each other over and it's just gonna suck. I feel like we just need to like get it together and like come together on common grounds and fucking change shit, make things better, whatever.
But part of it is cutting down your heroes. Like, I'm sure going back to a few years earlier, struggle era, I don't know what band it would have been, but there's so many bands at that time, be it Uniform Choice, be it Shelter, like bands that were doing things that didn't feel like they belonged to the thing, and people were pushing back on them.
Of
Like,
course. Completely. Because I went and fucked with Shelter because they were Krishnas. I threw hot dogs at them. Well, but they're veggie dogs, but like they didn't know that. But yeah.
better than
But
a
I
ham
also
sandwich.
but I fucking hate Krishna. Like Krishna's bullshit, and I'm sorry, but it's like sexist, misogynistic fucking bullshit. And I was like, these guys are lame. Get the fuck out of here. But like, I guess I shouldn't have been a dick, but like I thought Krishna was a real threat. So maybe Kent thought that fucking Swing Kids and Antioch Arrow and shit were a real threat. That what the threat is, I don't know because we weren't being misogynistic, sexist assholes hiding behind a religion. We weren't like, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not I am very flawed. I've been a dick most of my life. But at the same time, it's like I feel like it's like when someone like says the word and I'm like, oh, you're talking to me. I know it, and it's just like I'm just like ingrained and like ready to just fucking like, all right, like here we go. Like I don't know who you are, but like and I don't want to feel that way. So maybe that's an aspect where you just kind of you're ready to like find the battle and fight. But I just feel like maybe now that we're older, we can be more calculated with what that battle is, and maybe not fight necessarily. Maybe just like infiltrate or something. I don't know.
When Nicole Panter was on, the Germs manager from Decline, she talked about how like at times punk can be a place for people with trauma to inflict that trauma on other people, who will in turn inflict that trauma on other people. And I don't want to make you have to do the Justin Pearson greatest hit, like greatest hits, but there's certain questions that people force you to talk about all the time. Trauma being one of them,
Mm.
Jerry Springer being the other. But I feel like you are someone who has been very public that you've been through like unbelievable trauma. And I imagine this place, punk being this place, offered you like a place not to deal with it or anything, but like a place to be in it.
Yeah, well, fuck, um, that's a crazy thing to say because I feel like when I was in punk, I was immediately I looked at it as like a moral guideline. It was meeting certain bands and talking to people and like feeling like, oh, here's a community, and so I'm on this path, and the whole time I have these like fucking neo Nazis like shitting on me, or these jocks shitting on me, or my fucking mom shitting on me, or whatever it is, capitalism shitting on me. It's just like so it's like there's always going to be these things that you kind of have to go against, and sometimes it's your own community shitting on you. That's happened. Like a lot of shit has happened where like people that I thought I loved and loved me have been terrible. And it's just like, well, that whatever, there's still other people that I care about. There are like, my friends that have been in it since the beginning. A good example is Rob Moran from Unbroken. Like I will never have a problem with that guy, and I hope he never has one with me. And I'm grateful that we are still in the same world together, and we just played shows together recently, and like that's really important. But then there's like people that just want to fuck with you, you know, and maybe that's their insecurities. Um, I used to be insecure. I think I still am, but I used to like do dumbass shit and like start shit with people, and I feel like um it's that counterproductive stuff that's just gonna hold us back. So I'd rather just try to focus on cooler things.
Yeah, and I think that's part of growing up. And I think that it's like, at least I'm very old now, but the scene looks like it's gotten better in some regards towards this sort of stuff now. Like it felt like it was so unregulated at times, and because of that, there were abusers that hid in plain sight. Because of that, there was unbelievable violence that would be perpetrated against people within this scene. And maybe now, because it's not quite as underground, it's better for that in some
Mm.
ways. But it is something that I like. Obviously, like I'm doing a podcast for years on it, and I've been thinking about it since I was like first introduced to it as a kid. Like it's something that is such a fascinating world because it is so many different things to every different person involved in it.
Well, maybe the majority, not the majority, a lot of people involved were like Sid Vicious, you know, where you're like, oh, you're gonna fucking be stupid and nihilistic and wear a swastika and shoot heroin. Are you a bad person because of that? That's up to someone else to decide. But I know there's reasons why you were like that. You know, there's reasons why people became drug addicts, why people were abusers, why people identified with like really stupid ass shit, like wearing a fucking swastika t-shirt. So like those are the more important things than like, oh, you're fucking up, you're done, don't doing dumb stuff. So we're kind of learning from that, and maybe the world is learning from that because now it's like these issues are not changed, but like I remember I've said this in a couple other interviews and stuff and like podcasts where like I went and saw Converge play. I love Converge. I think they're a fantastic band. I assumed that their audience was going to be this sort of like male driven macho kind of like tough vibe. And there were like all these trans folks. There were really young people. There were really old people, you know, but it was like there were, you know, a lot of women up front. Like it was fucking rad. And it felt like it had a modern spin on what I thought hardcore was. Like everyone's like it wasn't because I remember growing up and just being like, yo, these people are gonna fucking beat us up because they think we're gay. And like now it's I don't think that's necessarily the same kind of vibe. And I'm glad that we can do that. I'm glad that we can like get past that. There's a lot more stuff we have to get past. But the evolution's there. So like it's happening, maybe not fast enough, but it's happening. And I'm glad. So like um maybe we're weeding out those like subversive, you know, I don't know, oppressive elements that are of any kind of subsect of humanity, you know, like we're supposed to be the opposite, you know, we're supposed to be the other option to like the jocks on the football team. Oh, we're the punks. We're gonna do that, you know, and we're just as bad, you know, and just differently bad. But like maybe we're getting our shit together a little bit in some way. I hope, you know, whatever.
Yeah, punk and hardcore, I think on a greater level, if we are getting our shit together, like it's always felt like it was 5 or 10 years ahead of the curve until in terms of society. So maybe it means 5 or 10 years from now, society will get its shit together. But we had social media first. The Max Rock and Roll letter section was way worse than X or Twitter could ever imagine at times. Like there are some incredible beefs that played out over the course of that thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
when you when you
Oh man.
when you first get to San Diego, because when John Reis was on the show, he talked about how kind of horrifically violent the skinhead scene was in San Diego. Was that still kind of prevalent? Because I've been told it kind of dies off a little bit into the 90s.
Yeah, well, I think in the 90s was like the height of like when the white Aryan resistance was on Geraldo and they did that big fight or whatever. That kind of and they were I remember at the same time they were on the cover of these Nazi skins were on the cover of Rolling Stone. There's a big article on them on Rolling Stone, and it was really, really strange because in San Diego we were so close to Fallbrook, which is where Tom Metzger and White Aryan Resistance was kind of headquartered. So there was a lot of that stuff in our city, and it was pretty wild because it was right around when I first moved here, and I mean, I moved from Phoenix, which is obviously way more racist than San Diego, but I think that like San Diego was destined to kind of have a lot of that shit because we're a border town. We have huge issues with the police and the border patrol, and I don't know. Yeah, it was a trip. There was a lot of that stuff, and going to shows where there was always Nazi skinheads like fucking people up, including myself, fucking me up. But it was like pretty wild. But yeah, it's gone away in a sense. But now we're having this like sort of reinvigorating, I don't know, like emboldenment of white nationalism due to major politics. So like, will we see it like at a punk show? I mean, maybe not. I don't think so. But you know, you'll see it at the grocery store. I mean, fuck, we had during COVID when you had to wear a mask, there was some asshole wearing a Klans hoodie at a fucking grocery store, and it's like, not a hoodie, a Klans hood at a grocery store, and you're like, dude, like that's some shit, you know. So yeah, it happens. It's gonna happen, but I don't know. It's the two steps forward, one step back, maybe thing where we're just not getting forward.
It feels like the stuff that really starts to emerge in the late 80s and into the 90s, like where it really, I think, goes back underground a lot with punk and hardcore, is where a lot of that stuff gets weeded out. Like when it's back to being 50 people at the Che Cafe where you kind of know everybody and you don't really have that kind of, I don't know, I wasn't there, but like at least it feels like in Toronto and looking at other scenes, like when it was underground like that, that was when a lot of that Nazi skinhead stuff really, those guys weren't necessarily showing up anymore in the same sort of way as they would have like at a circle jerk show or an exploited show or something in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I think also too because it was punk and hardcore were new in the 80s, so it didn't really have a defining like you kind of just like, oh, is punk racist? You know, like it I mean, I remember as a kid watching all these exploited videos where like they were like Nazis Sieg Heiling, and I'm like, what the fuck? You know, but then like now I just was hanging out with Rob Moran. They Unbroken played with the Exploited in Holland, and they were, and you know, Wadi was just saying all this righteous shit, like this pro-Palestinian thing, and fucking denouncing genocide and like denouncing governments and racism. And I was like, man, that's so rad. I wonder why he wasn't doing that in the 80s. But like, regardless, it's still rad that he's doing it, and it makes me feel like I can listen to an Exploited record and not have any, you know, kind of issues with it, I suppose. But you know, it's kind of like, I don't know. GG Allin's always a good example too. It's like, was he really like a racist, sexist piece of shit, or was he just like a free for all like hating of humanity? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But regardless, I think people have there is an overwhelming sense of like you can't do stupid shit like you used to do in the 80s. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think GG Allin's always like a fascinating example in punk because like, obviously it's the most extreme performer of all time, but he's also
Yeah.
like the artist kind of seemingly without redemption on a lot of levels, but also like you needed to have that to see how far it could go and you shouldn't go past. Like you need those parameter points like Sid Vicious, like GG Allin, like okay, we've seen where that goes. Let's not venture too
Well,
close to that sun, Icarus.
but then there's like but then there's like black metal bands with like murdering each other and stuff. You're like, well, there's that, you know. I mean, I don't know what like I
There's
that's why
there,
when like, you know, Marilyn Manson came around, like, oh, he's shocking. I'm like, it's not shocking, he's kind of boring or whatever, you know. I mean,
we've seen Sakevi. We know real craziness here in punk and
yeah,
hardcore. Like
yeah. The but I wonder about like what is acceptable and what's not. You know, I do trip out on that because everyone still like Bad Brains, even though they were homophobic and robbed the big boys for being gay. And like there was never any pushback for Bad Brains. Or like,
I
I
think
don't know,
I
there's
think I think that kept
Dillinger.
him. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that kept him out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Maybe but is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the thing you want to achieve, or do you want to go to any given hardcore show and see someone wearing a Bad Brain shirt, where like if you show up wearing a Screwdriver shirt, you're gonna get your ass beat? You know, is one worse than the other?
Yeah.
Yes, but like they're both not a, to
No, I
me, I'm
know.
like,
I know
whoa.
exactly what you're saying. I totally agree with you. That being said, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Punk Rock Hall of Fame, for whatever that is full of people that have done worse that are still worn. The shirts are still worn.
Yeah. I
And
trip out on like what people are like, Pantera with what's his name, C. Kyling and saying white power. It's like, and then it's like, that's a dumbass thing to do, man. You should fucking like, I guess you can apologize and be fine, but like that's also just like a fucking stupid thing to do. But then there's like things that kind of go under the radar. There's that video of Dillinger Escape Plan playing where Greg takes a shit on stage and like throws it into the crowd and calls everyone. And I'm like, I don't know, like, do we get rid of GG Allin or is he just doing what GG did? I don't know.
yeah, GG Allin, Sakevi, GG Allin, like there's some real horrible shit that he did. That's on
Yeah,
camera.
I
That's in
know.
documentaries by Oscar-nominated directors now.
That documentary, I think, is one of my favorite films, by the way. I think it says not that I'm like, oh, Gigi's great, but it says something that's fucking substantial. And you just really, I feel like everyone should use that as some sort of reference point. And if you're going to create art, like look at that and like take that all into consideration. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I think Hated is one of those movies that um, it's perfect in its terribleness because it's an incredible documentary, but just like what it's capturing and the way it kind of shows it, I don't know if it really shows it for what it is. Like Gigi's someone who, yeah, I don't know if he ever really did truly break character. Like if he had just kind of gone into that and become that thing. And it's interesting. Have you watched that final, Lower East Side riot video and then he walks around?
Yeah.
The most fascinating part to me is the part where this couple, like this very sort of Lower East Side art couple, comes running up to him. They're like, Kevin, Kevin. And they've got like their 2-year old daughter and they give it to Gigi. Gigi, covered in shit, gives the baby a kiss on the cheek and starts engaging to them just like as like a normal person would have a conversation. And you're like, wow, he's just in the midst of this fucking riot and he can turn
Yeah.
it off like that to have this conversation with this couple.
Well, I think a bigger point to that is that like he was a person that struggled with um I don't know, like I think he struggled with issues. He struggled with a lot, obviously, but I think that like maybe you're looking at a person that should have had I don't know.
There's a lot too, like Phoenix, Arizona, like the stories of some of the bands that came out of Phoenix in the first waves of punk rock, and some of the wild shit that they got up to on and
Yeah.
off stage, and like you're like, yeah, part of that's showmanship, but part of that's like a real mental health struggle. Like a normal, well-adjusted person wouldn't feel the need to dig up a graveyard, even if it is going to make headlines. You just wouldn't dig up
Yeah,
an
yeah.
animal graveyard.
But I do wonder, like, if, let's say, like, if GG got help with his mental instability and didn't start just doing heroin, what his artistic output might have been. Maybe not artistic like he can write a good song, but like artistic as like performance art. I think that's kind of like what he was. But it's true, like, yeah, I mean, you look at like there's all these sketchy things that people have done and stupid things that people have done. And I think maybe you just kind of have to be like, oh, I'm not going to do that now. And then you move on. I mean, I don't know. Like, I do kind of, I hate like saying specific things and sound like I'm shitting on someone else for their choices, but I wonder what their choices are driven by. And so like a good example is someone hit me up about playing bass for Marilyn Manson after that movie came out, and I was just like, do I want to play bass with it? I knew his previous couple bass players, they're my friends, and I like Gil, their drummer and stuff. Do I want to play in a band like that? Like in theory, yeah, I would play that kind of music, but then like, do I want to be in a band with a narcissistic potential, I mean, I don't know, like rapist fuckhead? Like, no, like I want to be in a band that's like where everyone's cool and like caring and not abusive, regardless if if those accusations are right or wrong. So it's like I wonder, like, oh, you went and they got someone else, they got a whole band together, and I tripped out, being like, they're selling out arenas or whatever the fuck they're doing, and it's like people are like, that's cool, not really caring, and it's just so then I think that maybe that like that line got crossed where like if you're part of the like the historical like sort of like ebullition realm of Max and rock and roll, or if you're just part of the mainstream garbage going back to like Phil Anselmo or whoever, like you could pull some stupid shit and still be a functioning capitalistic endeavor in this world, and like sail into the sunset with a paycheck, where all of us over here are like, hey, that's fucking wrong and pretty dumb. We're just going to remain on this sort of like moral and ethical path that we've been on. I don't know. I don't know.
I think that's where it's like the religion thing, right? Where this is what we're doing it. We're doing it in service to ourselves because we're doing it for something bigger than ourselves, and it's not necessarily a god in this case. It's a better world or a theoretical ideal. Whereas, like, yeah, you could sell yourself out and do that Marilyn Manson tour and be in that band, but you wouldn't feel good about it because you're part of this religion.
Totally. I thought like in my brain, I played out all these things. Like I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do that. But I was like, what if I did it? And like the first, it wouldn't be the first show, but in my mind, I was like, oh, first show. And I'm like, hey, Marilyn, Ryan, so like, what's up with those chicks that you raped? And then I'm like, oh, I'm out of the band. Like I would have done, not that I'm not trying to make light of rape or domestic violence or abuse whatsoever, but in my head, I'm playing out this like, kind of like, hey, motherfucker, like, what's up? And then like, all of a sudden I'm kicked out because he's like a fragile piece of shit artist that's an abuser, and I'm like, oh, there goes that. And then I'm not on the tour. So like, part of me wanted to accept the job and then just go sabotage it and get kicked out. But that's just a lot of effort and time and stuff that I don't want to mess with. But I wonder, like, yeah, I don't know. I wonder because like saying it's religious is hard at times. But I think like we just have to. I don't believe in God, but we have to be in this world where we're making something for the bigger. The bigger version of us, and for me, it's like, yeah, I'm broke as fuck. I'm going on tour, and I'll have people come up to me like in Italy or wherever, and they'll say, hey, your band saved my life in my 20s. And I'm like, holy shit, that's crazy. And I'm sure people say that to Marilyn Manson or about Marilyn Manson music. That's fine, whatever. But like, I have the direct interaction with the person, and I'm like, that makes all of that hard work that had no financial reward worth it. I saved this person's life, not even knowing I was doing that. Then I'm like, that might have been the bigger picture that we were like unaware of at the time. Sticking to this like quote unquote religious, moral high ground or something.
I think with Marilyn Manson, because I was of the age where I was susceptible to the fandom. Like, I don't say that I was, but my friends kind of got into it. And for me, it was it was like, oh, I don't want any part of this. Like the stuff he's talking about as a musician, like outside of the music, I'm just like, this guy just sucks. Like he's been saying it out loud for years that he sucks. And so, yeah, like at that point, like hearing Propaganda do a song called Refusing to Be a Man or Los Crudos or like, Drop Dead or you guys, like it was just like, oh, this is 100% where I need to be. Like, I don't want any part of this. Whatever this shit is, count me the fuck out.
Completely. I mean, you want to throw Los Crudos up against Marilyn Manson. There's like, that is fucking insane. Like I will choose Los Crudos a gazillion times over. Yeah, because it's so righteous and flawless, and there was no ego involved. It was like from their fucking hearts, and that's cool. Where I think like maybe Marilyn Manson, not maybe, but definitely Marilyn Manson had a different agenda.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, when you get to San Diego, is it Amenity is kind of the big band popping off? Like who would have been the band for you guys before you guys?
Amenity for sure was like the thing, but amenity was kind of the thing. Yeah. When I first moved to San Diego, I was like, wow. When I first got into music, I was like, these dudes are cool. And it was, but there was a lot of stuff going on. There was this band called Funeral March, which were really awesome. Um, and then kind of like discovering John Reis's realm, Pitchfork, and then that whole thing popped off, Drive by Jehu and Rock from the Crypt and stuff. But yeah, it's just like, I mean, I think at any point, like even if I was a little bit older or got here a little bit sooner, I would have like got hip to like the Zeros or I mean, there's always like even like Mojo Nixon or something, like there's always something. It's just like your age bracket and like what's happening and what you're able to access. Because I remember seeing like, I mean, I guess playing a little bit older, starting playing music, I was like, oh, Crossed Out and you know, eventually like Unbroken and stuff like that. So yeah.
Was like Battalion of Saints still kind of going? Because they kind
No,
of seemed to go off and on throughout the years, right?
when I got here to San Diego, they were not going. And I have a strange introductory to Battalion of Saints because the original drummer of the Locust, Dave Astor, his dad was in Battalion of Saints. And I remember becoming friends with Dave Astor before we started the Locust and kind of hearing that his dad was in this band that I saw records at the record store. I remember seeing it wasn't the Fighting Boys EP, but that's what his dad was on. It was like the LP or whatever, the black and white one. But I remember seeing it, not knowing who it was, and then hearing from this guy that his dad was in that band, and then going back and getting the record, being like, oh shit, I gotta get that record, So that was my kind of introduction. But they weren't a band anymore at that time. But then they later on, George, I think, got put a band together which had members of Heroin and Some Girls. Like it had like all the homies in it, and I was like, oh, you're playing with all of my comrades, which is cool. So yeah.
And I think he kept that going because I remember the first time we went out to California, we played a show somewhere between LA and San Diego with Battalion of Saints. But Mario, I know, played in one lineup, but he wasn't playing in this lineup that we played
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, they had he had Sal Gallegos, I think, was in the band too, who was from Some Girls and Secret Fun Club. But like he Matt Anderson, from Heroin and Gravity Records, was in the band on guitar. Our friend Chris Squire. I think they just had like a revolving cast of whoever to play the songs. And I'm pretty sure it was just George, the singer, and like got different people.
Yeah, there looked like a 10-year age difference between George and the rest of the band.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
were incredible. They were like they blew everyone else off the stage that day. And there was a lot of bands
yeah.
with one original member playing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was picking like sick ass drummers. You can't,
Yeah.
if you get a sick drummer, you're gonna rip hard. Because I do kind of look back at like the sort of uh what's the like the sort of level of expectations with drummers. Because like a good example is like Robo. Like that guy kind of sucked, on drums. And then like it's like now Dave Lombardo's the drummer in Misfits, and I'm like that shit's fucking sick with Dave playing. So yeah, the drum pedigree was brought up quite high, at least in like probably our generation. Like we were able to like see and play with people that were fucking sick and that would deliver, where like some of this other shit was pretty questionable. I mean, if you want to talk about Misfits, like Googie was a terrible drummer and Robo was not a good drummer. They got the job done and they made this iconic thing. So now I'm glad that like
The Misfits, like, and you hear it in the live bootlegs, not a great, like, it really falls apart in the live setting in the early years.
but they were like, playing on a floor, or like, well, people were. It was different then. It wasn't like there also wasn't like a good sound system. It's probably someone like holding a shitty recorder, and the next thing you know, that's going to be bootlegged as an LP later.
I have one where they're tuning like every song, and it's
Yeah,
never in tune.
yeah.
And I think he said, like,
Oh,
what? Hey, so we have to keep tuning. We're up here pounding these things like
oh,
jackhammers.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's Doyle. I don't think he ever really learned how to play guitar. So,
Who needs to play when you look that good? It's the Sid Vicious school of punk rock.
seriously, I mean, there was some meme about like punk where they were talking about like Crass, and then they're like, and then there's like Misfits, and they're like, we're talking about ghosts and goblins, or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, you could pick a lane there too, but that yeah, it was more of an aesthetic, I think, for Misfits, and that's cool. It was like reading a comic book. Uh,
I think
opposed to fighting. Yeah.
no, I know 100%. Like they're the He-Man of music, right? Like, and they're also like at one point the greatest punk band of all time, but at another point they're not at all a punk band, and they're like the antithesis of what punk is on some level. So it's like they're holding it all at the same time.
Yeah, I read this article about when Minor Threat first started, they got this gig opening for the Ramones, and I wish I knew where I read this at because it was such a fascinating story and about how like Ramones were just like kind of phoning in at this point. They were like very popular and they were all on heroin, and Minor Threat was like hungry and straight edge, and they just like ripped like harder than ever. And I would have liked to have gone to that show and seen and like as a Ramones fan and seeing Minor Threat and being like, oh fuck, here's the real deal. I guess I figured this out, and it's like you just like won the lottery or you graduated or you ascended to the next level or whatever, because you saw that happen.
Yeah, like it's interesting when CJ and John Reis were on the show together. And
Whoa.
yeah, I did
CJ is the bass player from the
the
Ramones, right?
Loans. Yeah, CJ Spike from Me First and the Gimme Gimmes and John Reis came over to my house. It was the best day of my life. We're sitting in the basement talking for the podcast. But CJ talked about how much hardcore fucked with Johnny and hardcore coming out and something being faster than them and
Yeah.
them not being the thing made him want to play faster. And that in turn really fucked with Joey because as a vocalist, he couldn't keep up with where that music went. You listen to those later Ramones records and he's just like, he can't keep up with that music at all.
Yeah.
And, but it was Johnny's reaction is to hardcore and that next generation coming in and like, I must have been that Minor Threat show that just ate at him, just being like,
Of
fuck.
course. I mean, could you imagine like that happening at that time? Like it was so new and innovative, like what Minor Threat was doing at that point. When you're like into punk and you're expecting this like certain, and I think the Ramones were amazing when they came out, but then you see like Minor Threat and you're like, oh shit, there goes that, that it's just you throw in the towel at that point. I think, and you can kind of see it. I mean, again, it became like a different thing. It was like they were trying to like hold on to this commodity and sort of pay the bills, I guess. I don't know.
You also see it happen like kind of time and time again where there's these certain bands and they come out and it's like, oh shit, the game's changed in punk and hardcore. And it's Locust, I think, is one of them. Like the Locust came out and I think it went both ways. Like it's funny, we're talking about Unruh's reaction to Swing Kids. I think the Locust, maybe because I'm thinking about it a little bit later, but I felt like the Locust was more of the divisive band because of the keyboards, because of like the Spock haircut stuff, which people put on you, and sort of like the white belt stuff, which came after you guys. But you guys kind of get saddled with that baggage a little bit. But there were just, as much as there were people being like, oh my God, this band, there were like tons of kids that were like, oh, we're going to play like this now. And it just spurned on a whole new wave of creativity. And you see it with, I think that Refuse Shape of Punk to Come record a few years later did that thing, that Hatebreed record, the Quicksand record, like, there's these records that are divisive, but you kind of need that to kind of advance the culture a little bit.
Yeah, it just the only thing is weird, I think, is when and I'm like probably like how the Ramones felt. They're just like, we started this thing and now you're cooler and better than us. And that's a hard thing to like accept, I guess.
Well, that's that ego thing, right? And that's why someone like O is so amazing because he could always seemingly be like, oh, it's your turn to have the ball now. And I say this as someone who's not able to give up the ball very easily.
I always think like I'm gonna fucking stab the ball and
Yeah,
then just go
no one
find
gets
another thing to
yeah,
do.
no one has it after me. I'm taking it with me and breaking it.
No, for myself, stab my own ball and then just be like, I'm gonna totally derail myself and go do like EDM or whatever. But not to keep like riffing on the Ramones or GG Allin. It was crazy and hated when Dee Dee was in Gigi's band and couldn't cut it. I was like, yeah, you're fucking with the wrong person right there. That was a trip to see those two worlds merge. But
That's my favorite thing about Gigi is it's constantly people, and obviously post hated this changes, but like up until hated, it's constantly people being like, it can't be this bad. Like Jay Mascis when he was on the show talking about playing in the band and getting there live and realizing like, oh shit, this is real. or Terry T when she was on the show talking about handing him his tampon and handing her his tampon, him eating the tampon, and then chasing her around the club with her menstrual blood coming out of his mouth. Like, I don't think anyone thought it could possibly be as fucked up as it was.
Yeah. But then there's people like John Reis who are just like, nothing seems to phase that guy. And he has like this impeccable output, like there's that photo of GG and John Reis together. And it like embodies everything John Reis is. You're just like that motherfucker. And then I'll go see like, then I went and saw that Jehu show at Balboa Park here in San Diego where he played with the Oregon Pavilionist player who is like got a PhD in organ playing, I guess. I don't know. And it was just so rad to watch Jehu play for free to 4,000 people and watch him like have telepathy with this person playing this huge fucking pipe organ. I was like, dude, like, and yeah, obviously Gigi couldn't do that, but and John could take a shit on stage and throw it at someone and eat a tampon, but like, would he know? And he did, someone already did it, but like John went and did the other thing. So like in my mind, John's just like Gigi, but like with actual talent, maybe. So there's that.
I love to imagine a world where Gigi is the Swami on Yo Gabba Gabba.
I mean, the thing is though, like Gigi influenced everybody. I'm sure he influenced John, and I'm sure like there's a little bit of Gigi in there, and that made its way to Yo Gabba Gabba.
Margaret Cho told me he was one of the greatest and most important American artists of the last half of the 20th century.
That Gigi was, or that John was?
Gigi.
What the fuck?
I didn't bring up John. I imagine she would have loved John too, though. But
Yeah.
She specifically mentioned Gigi there.
I mean, to me, John is like, I mean, he's my friend, and I love him dearly. And I don't mean to, if he ever hears this, I don't mean to make him feel uncomfortable. But he kind of is like Ian MacKaye to a lot of people. To me, he like Ian's great, and I love Ian, but like John is the dude. He's like he would be the musical pope or whatever the fuck you want to call it. For me,
he's the coolest person
fuck
ever.
yeah.
Like the Fonzie in real life.
There's so many times I've seen him perform, mainly in Rocket, which is funny, and I'm like, fuck, I gotta take note. Like he kind of like put this bar somewhere for you to be like, oh, that's like I gotta try to be that good at what I do, and I'm grateful for that. Not that I want to copy him. Obviously, I've never been in a rock and roll band, but like but that's the level of like righteousness that I want to achieve. I think. Yeah, he's a fucking brilliant person. I think there should be a statue erected of him in San Diego for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking actually. Last time he was on the show, he was talking about how punk let him down, and he doesn't feel like a punk. And I'm like, how can you not? You are this thing. Like this thing doesn't exist in the way it is now without you.
I wonder when that was. When was that he said that?
Guess it was this summer,
Huh?
or spring. He seemed a little down about just the music in general, and obviously he's been through a shit ton and lost a lot of people recently. So I don't mean to diminish that on him, but I really did feel like, I had to be like, no, dude, no, you can't. You're the pillar. If you go, this whole thing collapses.
Well, it's weird because not weird, but when I had him on my podcast Cult and Culture, it was very interesting and loving to talk to him. But I don't want to sound like an asshole here, but I drew a lot of parallels between him and Rick and me and Gabe Serbian, and I thought like a lot about like what he said, and I applied it to myself and Gabe, and how we both lost this sort of like counterpart of our lives, also our musical lives, I guess. But I realized like I found hope in it. I found hope in like, obviously this hugely important person left the planet and I'm never going to work with them again, but they're like in me, like in my brain and like my output, and I have to keep going, like not for Gabe or like that John needs to be going for Rick, but like you know, like their energy is in you, and your output is something that's gonna resonate still. I don't know. I feel like maybe I need to call up John and be like, can you please let Def Club open for plosives? And then you'll see how like punk exists, because all of your fans will be like, fuck this band, you know? Because we did it with when Rocket took Locust on tour, it was like a total disaster for the fans, and it was cool for us to hang out with Rocket, and that was right when Mario was in the band, but like, and probably very enjoyable for John, but the audience was like, fuck this band that's opening, you know? And so anyhow, I need to call John up and be like, yo, can Def Club play with plosives? And I'll show you that it still exists. So,
It feels like they would be a real, like Rocket would be a real tough band to open for, because people are coming for Rocket.
oh,
And a
totally.
Rocket fan isn't necessarily a punk fan as they're much a Rocket fan.
I know firsthand. Yeah. I mean, playing in like Little Rock and Dallas, like, yeah, those people were just like, fuck this shit. And it was a lot of work for us, but yeah.
Those are those shows that you like look back upon, and like those are the legendary shows when you see like White House opening for Sham 69, or the Screamers opening for someone crazy. Like there's these like just crazy conflicts in styles, but when you're
Yeah.
living through it, it's not the most pleasant show to have to play.
Yeah. Speaking of opening bands and not throwing like terrible bands into the mix, there's this flyer for a show that was Screwdriver, Susan the Banshees, and the Police, and it was the Police's first show.
Yeah.
And I think it was their first show. That blew my mind. But they weren't like neo-Nazis yet, so
Well,
there's that.
it's an interesting thing going back to what you were talking about earlier with Screwdriver, where there's this whole thing that Ian Stewart, not diminishing all the terribleness they wrought, but that this to him was just a means to get popular, and that this wasn't like he wasn't a true believer necessarily in his message so much as he was like a guy being like, well, this could be a trend. Like this seems to be where the wind is blowing.
Fucking terrible trend.
The
Uh,
terrible trend, and the
yeah.
once again, not to undermine the evil that was wrought from it, but there's a Stuart Home did this book Cranked Up Really High, and in it he reprints a letter that Ian Stewart wrote to Sounds or the Enemy around the same time that Screwdriver was, going through that lineup change and becoming the Nazi band, where he's condemning the National Front getting involved in oi music and how people had to be vigilant to prevent them from getting in there and ruining this scene.
Whoa.
So it lends credence to the theory that, yeah, this guy's just an opportunist. Once again,
Yeah.
not diminishing the terribleness, but he was not necessarily the true believer.
Yeah. Like Kanye West.
Yeah, like just like someone looking for the shot, right? And like he's playing with the Police, playing with Susie and the Banshees, and then it's like, oh yeah, well this is the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to
Yeah.
undermine Western civilization.
Speaking of Ian Stewart, it was great that he got decapitated. That was such a
Oh,
really
incredible!
cool way to. That was like I remember hearing about that on MTV News. I was like, what the fuck? That guy got decapitated, like out of all ways to die. Good for him.
Farewell, farewell. On to much more impressive bands. Downcast is a band I've heard you talk about being a huge influence on you. I think Downcast,
Sure.
and I think Voice of Reason is another band. Two bands doing that style that are completely underrated.
Yeah, I liked Voice to Reason. I saw them Voice to Reason a lot, or not a lot, a few times when I was younger. But Downcast was like the thing. I remember like getting their record and being so into it and playing it to like my metalhead friends, and they're like, "This is cool. It's like Metallica with no solos, though." And I was like, "That's great." Like I hate solos. But I saw them play when I was 15 or maybe 14, right before I wasn't in a band yet. I saw him play Gilman Street, and it was like one of the most profound four-song sets that I've ever experienced in my life. There were so many visceral things that were just like, wait, what? And like what? And what? And what? And I was just like, like that's a band that I want to like achieve to like not be like, but it was the focal point for it was an obvious focal point for struggle. I think we were all very influenced by Downcast, but yeah, and also just like some of the best people. Kevin Doss is like hands down one of my favorite human beings on this planet. And yeah, I think they were a really rad band. They were the ones that were like coming out of the gates, like doing all this shit that people didn't like. And you're just like, oh, and then now it's like the thing, you know?
I saw like a crazy flyer for you guys. It's like you guys, Offspring, Grups, which I think is
Yeah.
Matt Freeman's band, and
Yeah.
Blast playing together.
Yeah. Yeah. That was weird too because um we we ended up struggle headlined that show and they changed the flyer at the last minute because they're like, hey, we think that this band Offspring is like really big now, and so they changed the flyer. I think maybe Offspring's on the top on the flyer, but originally it was like they were like, we're gonna have you play with these other bands, and we're like, all right, whatever, yeah. Grumps, yeah, it was a weird show. It was fine, but yeah, Offspring didn't do that like keep them separated song though, so.
What would have been right? Like it would have been Nemesis year's Offspring, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck it was. I don't even remember them at all. I just remember Grubs being the only cool band on the bill and not really liking anything else. I mean, yeah, Offspring wasn't anything to write home about
You
at
didn't like
all.
Blast?
Oh shit, sorry, Blast. But I actually don't think they played that show. Sorry.
Oh,
I love Blast. I'm pretty sure they didn't actually play because I had only oh man, I mean, I feel like I have a good memory, but I only seen them play once at the Che, and I don't think I was playing that show. But fuck, that band was good. I mean,
oh yeah.
yeah, they were like just so flawless. Yeah, sorry, Blast. But yeah, on that show, I don't think they ended up playing. Anyhow, maybe they did.
It's interesting with the Offspring because I always think of them as being the band that shouldn't have been able to succeed. Like it's not like Green Day or Nirvana. There's like nothing about like he's got Bo Derek hair. It is nasally voice. It's like not like how did this happen?
Oh, Derek. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it was like an Orange County thing, you know. I don't even know they're from Orange County, but they just kind of feel to me, it's like they just seem like Pennywise and all that kind of stuff that came out of Orange County that was just like, ugh. Um, I don't know. Yeah. Because before that, it was like Vandals who were pretty rad, I guess. I don't know.
I love that Pennywise and like 16 and Despise You are all connected through being on Theologian Records.
That's crazy too. But I mean, yeah, Pennywise like had to start somewhere, I guess. And
Yeah.
then they're just like, oh, we're gonna go this other like pop punk thing route.
I think they were though a band that was doing that style from the beginning.
Of course.
Like they really did kind of have that sound and kind of stuck with it. And yeah, like what there were definitely bands like that have like a Red Hot Chili Pepper style 7-inch, and then next record they sound like the Descendants, or a metal record,
Yeah.
then they sound the Descendants. But with Pennywise, you're like, no, that was the sound they had from the get go.
I mean, that kind of shit wasn't as jarring. I fucking hate pop punk, but it wasn't as jarring back then because it wasn't like such a mainstream commodity. It was, like NoFX wasn't like absolutely terrible yet. You're just like, it's fine. Now you'd just be like, that's fucking terrible. Please turn that off. But at the time it was just like, oh, the poppy stuff is happening now, or whatever.
Which is like it's interesting because at a certain point, like you wouldn't be playing with a band that sounds like the Offspring in the Swing Kids, let's say.
Yeah.
And then again with the Locust, you probably would be playing with bands that kind of sound like not the Offspring, but like in that sort of like poppier style. Like it felt like it got really factioned off towards the late 90s.
Yeah, I mean, the Locust was always like keen to try to play with like a variety of bands, and sometimes it like sucked to play with trash. Fuck, I shouldn't have said that because if I name those bands, then they'll be like, dude, that sucks that you said that about us. But like, where we were like really, really into playing with bands like Airborne Radar and Lightning Bolt and Get Hustle and Les George's Leningrad, or even like we did tours with, like I said, with Rocket, or we toured with Bratmobile. Like we wanted to make it weird and eclectic, but then sometimes where people are like, you should tour with this other like post-hardcore band or this metalcore band, and then it was fucked. You're just like, this sucks. these people suck, these bands suck, their audience sucks, like this sucks bad. So I think like keeping it eclectic is like maybe it goes back to that like weird San Diego DNA that we all had, you know, we're like, oh, we just do whatever the fuck we want, and it'll make sense to at least us. And that was the goal. Like I wanna like not have to sit through this other band every night on tour. Like I wanna be able to like, you know, like the things that I'm aligning myself with. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but yeah.
And I feel like that's what, same with us. That's what we've always tried to do is go out with bands that don't necessarily sound like us, that coincidentally will wind up being much more popular than we could ever hope to have been as a band, which is always a good feeling a couple years later. But it does, I think it does a disservice to your band if you're not playing with bands that are easy for your audience to be like, oh, these guys are all one scene. I get it. This is this stuff. I just have to like this scene. Like I feel like those package tours serve like a marketing thing for these bands. Like I'm not saying they're all going into that with that intention. There might just be like, oh, let's all tour together because we all sound the same, we all dress the same, and it's kind of cool. But I think for the
Yeah.
audience, it's like when Sub Pop would do the Sub Pop tour, or later on when all the Lookout bands would tour together, and it would be like a Lookout tour or Victory Records tour, where it's like a lifestyle branding exercise too.
Well, okay, that I completely see what you're saying, but then there was like the Locust did this Oops tour, which was the Locust, Lightning Bolt, and Airborne Radar, and then we would get like two regional other bands like Blood Brothers or Orth Realm or Get Hustle and Quintron. Like it was just, but the whole night or Erase Errata, like the whole night would be just like, here's five completely bizarre bands that aren't musically the same, but we were all so bizarre that it all made sense. So like I don't know where that fits in the marketing sense, because that still like people will reference that tour. And for us, it really opened our eyes to like go like, oh, well, let's just tour with like our friends that are also bizarre. Like, and again, like the Locust and Airborne Radar doing a split 7-inch seems very, very smart. But like if you listen to the two bands, they're one like the Locust is like way more metal and more precise, and Airborne Radar is like more, I don't know what they are. Like, it didn't make, it wasn't like getting like a record where it's like Drop Dead and Los Crudos or whatever, like Drop
Yeah.
Dead and Crossed Out on a 7-inch. Like that makes sense. It sounds similar.
Locust Jenny Piccolo, I think, made sense that way. And I think, like, to me as a kid, was like, okay, I get it. This is like a scene. And these guys are, which might have been a disservice later on when people were like, oh, this is a scene.
Yeah. Yeah, because also there was like a lot of comedy involved. It was in that point, like it was just like you go see Jenny Piccolo. It was just like they were just like they were almost like a stand-up comic with that played like brutal music, and then it became like this thing where people would come and like heckle the Locust, and that was not fun. After a while, you're just like, this is so dumb. Um,
But then there were Locust style bands almost immediately. Like, I think of like Standing Eight in kind of my area, but they were like all over the place. It seemed like there were bands that were like, and probably also Swing Kids inspired too, but following in specifically kind of your stylistic footsteps.
I mean, I guess so, but at the same time, it's like we were kind of just like around when the VSS was around and stuff, and we just wanted that. Like we were really into the VSS, and all of Sunny K stuff, obviously with like Angel Hair being before that, but um, the style stuff was strange because we were just like, oh, you're weird. Come and align yourselves with us, or let us align ourselves with you. Like, this is great. A lot of it was like, and not even really realizing, a lot of it was subconscious, but we were trying to like fuck with the sort of gender norms of hardcore because we thought it was like way too masculine and macho. And we were just like, oh, you're weird, or you look weird, or you have, there's women in your band, or you have synthesizers, or I don't, whatever it is that like seemed that to go against the like normal straight white male hardcore thing was like what we were like about. But I mean, again, like even with you guys, like like what would you consider the genre that you fit in? I don't know. Like
Like
that's
punk, right? Because that's the thing is like we're influenced by, Swing Kids. We're influenced by Confront were influenced by the Sex Pistols, right? Like I feel like I feel
Huh.
like this is my genre because I can be like, oh yeah, I love Gang of Four, but I also love Negative Approach, and all of these people thought they were punk, and this is their interpretation of punk or their offshoot of it type thing. So yeah, I've always felt like I could be at home calling ourselves a punk band because we can be whatever the fuck we want within this. The Homosexuals were a punk band.
I know, but then yeah, it's so weird. I feel like ultimately the Locust was a punk band, but like at the end of the day, we had people saying like you're fake grindcore, and like we're not fucking even calling ourselves that, like so it's just like I just feel like there's like the purist or something that'll like stop you from saying whatever. And so I was always just because yeah, punk is very relevant, and so is hardcore, so is metal, so is thrash, so is no wave, everything, everything, all that shit makes all kinds of sense. But like we were taking all of that, like we weren't just like we were an ethically punk band, but a musically punk band, absolutely not. We were too precise for that, I think. We weren't sloppy enough or whatever you want to call it, I guess. Like to me, it seemed like technical death metal, but like fun. Uh, I don't know.
I think that's the thing though, is like when you having once you've been involved in punk, you can't ever completely shed it. So no matter what style you're doing afterwards, it'll
Hmm.
always have a sort of I don't want to say a detachment because it's not that necessarily, but like an awareness of it
Well,
because
I wasn't trying to shed it. I feel like the people that were part of it were trying to shed us. They're just like, oh no, you're going out, you're coloring outside the lines. Get the fuck out of here. And you're like, oh, whoops.
I look at you guys as being part of a wave of bands that brought punk back into hardcore. Because
Wow,
I think the
that's a tall
90s
order.
well, I think the 90s was like a lot of it was exercising the punk out of hardcore and it was becoming this at times
Like
very
exercising like the exorcism.
yeah, it was becoming a very boring thing
Yeah.
at times, right? Like you go to hear the same bands make the same speeches, playing the same down-tuned slow music. Shit
Mhm.
got so slow.
Yeah.
And it was in the same kind of like environments and I felt like there was like a wave of bands that kind of came back and brought a little bit of the neon punk color
Mhm.
to the palette again.
Mhm. That's a cool way to say. I appreciate that. To me, like even before the Locust started, was like Unbroken. Like seeing Unbroken look like Morrissey, fucking sound like Slayer, and be straight edge like Youth of Today. I was like, this is great. Do I like any of that stuff? I mean, I like Slayer, but the other stuff I could do without. But it was just rad that it was like going and see Unbroken play with Snapcase and fucking Mean Season and shit. And you're like, dude, Unbroken's so cool. Like, and a lot of it was the way they looked, but their swag and their attitude. I mean, their attitude was part of their music. And I think that was like fucking rad. And so that was kind of like, because then there was Antioch Arrow and all, and then whatever, like all those bands that just were kind of bizarre, where you couldn't be like, oh, you're a punk band. You just be like, what are you? And that was like what I really liked. But all the what are you bands are punk.
Yep. Oh, like if you really get into it, everything cool is somehow connected back to this thing. Like if you weren't into hip hop or punk as a kid, what the fuck were you into?
Totally. I mean,
And
that's a whole other thing too. The hip hop punk rock correlation or connection is like real. So I mean, you like look at people in the inner cities using turntables as instruments. It's like the most insane punk development of music ever.
Talib Kweli told me that one of his biggest lyrical influences was Jesse Michaels from Operation Ivy.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like there is like this sort of deep connection between the two because I think they're both ultimately trying to strip away the edifice and just talk about reality. And
Hmm.
that reality could be Patti Smith's reality or it could be the Dead Boys' reality, but they're not like and that's why going back to the Misfits, that's why the Misfits are the great contradiction because they're not singing at all about reality.
I know. I don't know what my draw to them was. I think my draw to the Misfits was probably Pusshead. Otherwise, I would have been. When I was younger, I was like, I got Nevermind the Bullocks, and I got the first Suicidal Tendencies record, and I was like, holy shit, this is everything. I'm so into this stuff. And I went to this record store and I saw all the Misfits tapes, and I was like, fuck, Well, Legacy Brutality looks like the coolest and it sounds brutal. And I got it. I was like, this sounds like some bullshit like Eddie Cochran or something, you know? It was just like fuck, just like rockabilly. I was like, this sucks. And I was really, really disappointed in that. And it wasn't until I got Earth AD where I was like, oh yeah, that band's cool. So yeah, Misfits, whatever.
Style wise, I know people always talk about Nation of Ulysses, but it seems like to me it would probably been more from like Morrissey stuff on San Diego fashion wise, like why people started dressing differently. Like it seems like it's coming from a different place than the Nation of Ulysses.
The Nation of Ulysses thing like hit pretty hard, and I think that was like a giant shift with like mod stuff. But like the Morrissey thing, I think was already ingrained with like the Latinx community. I think people were already into that, and obviously like all those guys in Unbroken. I mean, I probably would have never gave a shit about what Morrissey. I mean, I like the Smiths; they were hugely popular and very, very important. But like, it wasn't until I was like, oh, you guys are gonna all look like the Smiths and Morrissey and play metal. Like, this is fucking rad. But it was, but there was also like John Reis, you know, and all those cats. Like, I mean, he when they started looking like rockabilly and stuff, that was cool. I was like, wow, you guys look cool. To me, it was just like I had a leather jacket and a bunch of shit written on my clothes, and like, you know, I was just like a typical punker. And then I was like, oh, we can pick a style, you know, and that's cool. Um, which I guess happened. Yeah, I don't know.
Justin, this has been amazing, and I have kids that are going to be coming home from school any moment now, or otherwise I'd keep you going forever. You got to come back and do a part two whenever you want.
Whenever you want.
Oh, this has been
Yeah.
awesome, and yeah, anytime.
Thank you so much. And if you come to San Diego, because we only do our Cult and Culture podcast in person, but I would love to have you on our podcast. So we could talk about all the stuff we just talked about again.